Hello, a very good morning to you. After a month of campaigning, Conservative Party members are expected to receive their ballot papers this week as they vote to decide who will become the next Prime Minister. Well, tonight, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak will be grilled by Tory voters in a live leadership programme hosted by Kay Burley here on Sky News. Well, Mr Sunak has launched a fresh attack on Ms Truss's plans for tax cuts, saying they'll further drive up interest rates. But he's been criticised too, with his former ally Sajid Javid saying his plans risk the UK sleepwalking into a high-tax, low-growth economy. So let's bring in our political correspondent Amanda Acas now. So, big debate tonight here on Sky News between these two leadership contenders. So what's the state of play as they go into that debate?
Well, another day, another poll really reinforcing Liz Truss's lead over Rishi Sunak. So this latest survey comes from Conservative Homes, suggesting 58% of party members are backing the Foreign Secretary, compared to 26% for the former Chancellor. Only 12% still undecided. And those kind of margins are really similar to the polling we saw yesterday from YouGov as well. Another big blow last night for Rishi Sunak, as you say, Sajid Javid coming out with a fairly ringing endorsement for Liz Truss, with some quite withering words for Mr Sunak's tax policies, saying it risks sleepwalking the country into becoming a middle-income economy. And in some ways, it's not surprising. Mr Javid's own platform, when he was running to be leader, was about cutting taxes. But at the same time, the two men are quite close. They work together in the Treasury and are seen to have been friends in the past. So it will be a disappointing blow. Now, this brings the total of leadership contenders backing Liz Truss now to 5. None of them coming out for Mr Sunak. He does have a bit of a boost from Nigel Lawson, the former Chancellor in the 80s, in the Telegraph, who says Liz Truss's policies risk the country going back into the inflationary spirals we saw of the 70s. And really, the economy is a central issue in the debate. We know the Bank of England later are expected to put interest rates up. There's a big warning from the Resolution Foundation that we could see inflation reaching 15%. And this has given both candidates a chance to kind of rehash their key arguments on the economy. So we've got a statement from Mr Sunak saying that timing is everything. If we rush through with tax cuts, that's going to lead to more inflation, putting people's mortgage interest rates up. Liz Truss saying, no, we need to cut taxes now in order to boost the economy. That's clearly what the big topic of debate will be on tonight on Sky News. We know they're going to have the opportunity to be questioned by those key undecided party members before being questioned by Kay Burley in interviews as well. A 90-minute-long programme. For Liz Truss, the contest clearly is hers to lose at the moment. For Rishi Sunak, it is really perhaps, as the ballots go out to party members this week, the last big throw of the dice to try and win over some of those unconvinced voters.
Yeah, fascinating to see how they both handle it. That's obviously later on tonight. Well, the Prime Minister, the next Prime Minister, will be decided by Conservative Party members, and they are who will make up the audience of tonight's special programme on Sky News. Our People and Politics correspondent Nick Martin has been speaking to two of them who are yet to make up their minds about which candidate to back.
Claire Greenfield lives in Solihull in the West Midlands, and she's a loyal Conservative. But the leadership hopefuls still have some persuading to do if they're going to get her vote. Ahead of this debate, where are you between the two candidates, Rishi Sunak, Liz Truss? Where are you leaning?
So at the moment, I'm undecided between Rishi and Liz. I am leaning towards Liz Truss more, and so this debate will hopefully make up my mind as a member of the Conservative Party, and I can cast my vote with confidence.
Claire says she has doubts about Rishi Sunak's motivations to become PM, and Liz Truss's recent climb down over her policy to determine the salaries of public sector workers based on where they live.
I think he supported the country very well through COVID. However, the thing I don't like about him is I do feel he stabbed Boris in the back. Liz Truss, I like the fact that she's been strong on the international stage, especially against Putin. However, I was disappointed with this U-turn, and I thought to myself, is this something that's going to be a carry-on of the previous Boris government, U-turning all the time?
130 miles north in Harrogate, Sue Lumbey is yet to fully decide. Sue is 71 and a councillor.
I think they're good in that they're very different. We have a very clear view on what they're both beliefs, they're both directions. I think she's quite direct. She's not polished on camera, and I like that. I think she's been a very good Foreign Secretary. Generally, I would agree with Rishi Sunak over the tax situation. I don't think you can keep borrowing. But today, in these days, with the Ukraine crisis and therefore the fuel crisis and everything else, I think poor people just can't take any more squeezing. So I definitely favour Liz Truss on that one.
Sue, like Claire, will take her seat in the audience at the Sky News leadership debate. It's the last chance the candidates will have to persuade members before voting begins. Nick Martin, Sky News.
Well, let's stick with the leadership election. And NHS leaders are warning this morning that neither candidate has yet provided what they call meaningful long-term solutions to the challenges facing the NHS. Well, the NHS Confederation has written to both of the candidates setting out their concerns. And Lord Victor Adebowale, the organisation's chair, joins me now. A very good morning to you. So, first of all, tell us a little bit about these letters that you've sent to the two leadership candidates. What are you saying in that letter?
Well, we've sent a letter to both the candidates just saying that my members are really concerned about summer, which is a bit like winter. We've got winter in summer. We have three challenges that are pretty fundamental. We have a workforce challenge, 100,000 vacancies in the NHS, 165,000 in social care. We have an estates challenge with crumbling buildings and very old equipment. And we have a social care challenge again, in that we're not recruiting or paying enough staff to get people out of hospital or into hospital, which is meaning we've got a backlog of ambulances waiting in A&E, and we can't move people into hospitals because we can't move them out of hospitals because we don't have social care packages for people once they're well enough to leave hospital. So in some cases, we've got 20% of beds taken up with people who could leave but can't leave because there is no social care packages. We have a backlog in elective care, which my colleagues are working really hard to reduce, and in fact are making some inroads, even though it's increasing. But the state of the buildings means they can't carry out the operations, and we certainly have one cases where the roof in the hospital is causing real problems for use of elective care surgery. And as I say, we have a problem with vacancies. Now, neither candidate has addressed these issues full on. And we need them to be resolved, because if we don't, we can't offer the care that people deserve and they pay for in their taxes. So we have a real problem. On top of that, we have an inflation challenge, which has wiped out the very welcome additional funds that were given to the NHS earlier. So what we need from both candidates is we need them to level with the public, basically, about what is going on, what the public can expect, and what they're going to do about these short-term, actually, medium-term and long-term crises in the NHS and social care system.
And what do you want to hear from them, apart from addressing the issue more? Is it more money that you're after?
Well, I'd like them first to acknowledge that there is a crisis, that this is really serious. 9 out of 10 of our leaders are basically saying that this is the worst they've seen it, and it's going to continue. I think, it's not for me to tell them how to manage the economy, but I do think we need to be honest with taxpayers about the fact that you get what you pay for at the end of the day, and we do need a health system which actually is a contributor to the economy. If you're waiting for an operation on your hip, your knee, your cancer treatment, you're not working. If you're not working, then you're not contributing to the economy, you're not paying taxes. So this is a significant challenge for the economy. A healthy nation is a working nation. If we're not healthy, then we can't work. So what we need is both candidates to be straight with people about the state of the NHS and the healthcare system, and actually put forward credible ways in which we can resolve the matter in the medium and long term.
The national insurance rise, which has been debated a great deal in this leadership contest, was destined, it was the money that was raised was destined for the NHS. Now, Rishi Sunak is going to keep that rise. Liz Truss has said that the country can't afford it, the people can't afford it. The cost of living crisis is too great for people to pay extra taxes. What's your take on that?
Well, I can tell you what they can't afford. We can't afford an NHS system which is crumbling and can't treat people properly, so they can't work. So we welcome the additional funds, and we would want that to continue. It's for the two candidates, whoever becomes Prime Minister, to make the difficult choices. That's why we have Prime Ministers on our behalf, to ensure that the NHS and social care system is properly funded. But what we do need is realism. We need them to be realistic with the public. It's not about political rhetoric or gimmicks. It's about saying to the public, this is the state of the NHS and social care system. This is what we're going to have to do. I've yet to meet anybody, certainly in the health or care system, who is saying, I'd rather have a lower tax and no health system. I think that's not a credible choice, and we look to our leaders to present us with solutions to these challenges. It's my job to put forward the real state of the NHS and the healthcare system on behalf of my members.
Well, yes, and if we look at the different candidates, Liz Truss has said that she will provide the funds necessary. She'll just raise them through a different means. And she's talked about measures like stripping away certain levels of management as well. What do you make of the plans that she's announced so far as the NHS is concerned?
I don't know that they're very specific or clear, and I'm not sure that they address the challenge. The issue here, as I've said, is that we have 165,000 vacancies in social care. We have 100,000 vacancies in the NHS. We need a fully costed workforce plan, which actually ensures that we can employ enough people to care for your relatives, my relatives, and members of our community. They need to be very clear about how they're going to fund that. They need to be clear about what resources they're going to make available to fix our crumbling estates and on our equipment. And they need to ensure that we can pay social care workers enough so that we can find the packages of care that get people into hospital, we can get people out of hospital, so we get desperate people in need of urgent care into hospital. So I'd like specific answers to those three key questions. One of which we need to be resolved now. I mean, the social care challenge, we're simply not paying social care workers enough to do the skill jobs necessary to get people out of hospital, and so that we can actually get people in the back of ambulances. These aren't people who are dilettantes. These are people in desperate need of emergency care in hospital, and who have to wait in the back of ambulances sometimes for hours, if they can get an ambulance at all, because the ambulances are rushed to the end of to the end of their capacity. So we need answers to those specific issues. That's why we've been so clear in the letters to both candidates.
And could those answers be provided by a special task force? Because that's Rishi Sunak's plan, isn't it? To introduce a task force along the lines of the COVID vaccine task force to try and address some of these issues. Do you welcome that?
Well, I'm all for task forces and specific interventions, but again, they avoid the answer. We know what the answer is to the social care problem. We've said we as a membership body don't complain without presenting solutions. The answer to the social care challenge is to pay people a minimum of £10.50 an hour. That means we can actually attract people into social care, or keep people in social care who are leaving to get easier jobs in, say, retail or the hospitality industry. We know that the backlog in capital building requirement just requires an injection of money. And we know that the inflationary costs that have actually reduced the amount of money available to the NHS needs an urgent injection of cash to put that right. We can do the rest. I have full confidence in my colleagues, in their leadership abilities, and in the front line of our NHS and social care system to deliver, as they did during the pandemic. What they need is the resources and the leadership to enable them to do so. So, I think what we need are specific responses. I will work with whoever my members will work with, whoever becomes Prime Minister. But what we need them to be doing is to be really honest about, these are the challenges. We accept what you're saying as leaders of the health and social care system. This is what we're going to do with you, with with you to resolve them. And we've made suggestions. We're very clear about what needs to happen.
OK. Well, Lord Victor Adebowale, Chair of NHS Confederation, thanks very much indeed for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
And it'll be interesting to see to what extent the NHS does come up tonight. In Sky News' special Tory leadership programme, it's at 8 o'clock this evening. The battle for number 10 will see the two candidates answer questions from the live studio audience, as well as an in-depth interview with the host, Kay Burley. And there'll be special coverage from 7 o'clock here on Sky News. And you can also watch it live on Sky News' website or app, or follow on our live blog. Let's take a look now at the stories that are making the front pages of this morning's papers. And the Daily Telegraph understands that plans for a £250 million water plant that's supposed to ease the burden of hosepipe bans has been taken out of service. While the Star hears that water companies are encouraging people to report their neighbours for flouting those hosepipe bans. According to the Express, inflation could hit 15% by next year, with gas bills substantially to blame. The Daily Mail has the Attorney-General Suella Braverman again pledging to curb so-called wokeism. The Mirror features swimmer Adam Peaty calling on the government to invest more in children's sports facilities, especially given the Lionesses' victory at Euro 2022. The Guardian carries an investigation which has found that a far-right ecosystem is targeting children in the UK in an attempt to radicalise them online. Those are your papers this morning. Let's tell you what's coming up on the show. Later on this hour, we'll have our daily polling pit stop, where we'll get the latest numbers on how the Tory leadership candidates are doing. We'll be speaking to Craig Watkins, Chief Executive of Kantar Public UK. Former leadership candidate and Attorney-General Suella Braverman will tell us why she's backing Liz Truss. And later on, we'll speak to personal finance expert Gemma Godfrey on what impact an interest rate rise could have. Now, Archie Battersby's life support will be withdrawn at 11 o'clock this morning unless his family launches a High Court bid by 9 a.m. to move him to a hospice, something his parents plan to do. It comes after the European Court of Human Rights refused an appeal to stop doctors ending life-sustaining hospital treatment, saying it will not interfere with the decisions of UK courts. Sky's Sadia Chowdhury reports.
9 court attempts to keep her son alive. Archie's mother now faces another on where he should be when his life support treatment is ended. It comes after the European Court of Human Rights decided it cannot intervene to help.
Absolutely deflated, just so let down. Obviously that was our last option. With regards to even the fact that we've been offered help from other countries, they're not even prepared to shift on that. We've now got to fight to see whether we can get them out of here to have a dignified passing at a hospice. It's unfair.
Decisions about her child that are out of her hands.
He's good. He's been good all along. That's the most heartbreaking thing about it. I wish I could take you all in there to see. Like for yourself. It's just unfair. The fact as a parent, we've got no rights with our children. It's disgusting.
Holly Dance has fought Barts Health NHS Trust in a remarkable case that started with a fight over whether Archie should have a brainstem test to be declared legally dead, and culminated in legal arguments about the UK's international treaty obligations. The hospital say treatment will end at 11 a.m. today, unless the family file an application at the High Court to move him. They want to take him to a hospice, but Sky News understands the Trust will oppose this. It could be the 10th court appearance for Holly Dance, whose stance had never changed. All she'd asked for was time for Archie to recover. She points to the case of Lewis Roberts. declared brainstem dead last year, but just hours before his organs were to be donated, Lewis breathed by himself. This is him last week, playing football.
I just feel horrendous for the family. Awful, because it's taken out of their hands, isn't it? It's a constant fight and a battle for them, which really it shouldn't be that way, should it?
It's absolutely terrible. Can't believe it. That I was pronounced dead, and now he's getting pronounced dead.
A dream come true for one family, unrealised for another. Sadia Chowdhury, Sky News in London.
The Bank of England is expected to announce the largest interest rate rise for 27 years in the face of soaring inflation. Well, let's get more. We can speak to our correspondent, Matthew Thompson, who's in East London for us now. So, Matthew, what are we expecting then from the Bank of England?
Well, look, the markets are widely expecting the bank to raise interest rates by 0.5 percentage point to 1.75%, which would be the biggest single interest rate hike for almost 30 years and the 6th consecutive rise in interest rates. And at the same time, we're expecting the announcement of the beginning of the winding down of the vast programme of quantitative easing, as it's called, which has seen the bank acquire some £895 billion worth of gilts and corporate bonds since the beginning of the financial crisis. And together, those two things really represent the biggest step yet away from the era of cheap and easy money that we've become used to over the last 10 years or so. And the reason for that, well, it's the spectre of soaring inflation, which is already expected to hit 11% by the end of this year. And if you consider that the Bank of England's target for inflation is just 2%, well, then you can see why they think they need to take some action. The trouble is that raising interest rates is not without its risks. It will immediately increase borrowing costs for millions of people, particularly the 2 million or so people who are on variable or tracker rate mortgages. In the middle of a cost of living crisis, it will, as I say, push up borrowing costs for lots of people. There's also a risk, incidentally, that it will tip the entire country into a recession. You have to imagine if you suck so much demand out of the economy, then that is a real and potential risk. In fact, overnight, there's a survey by Ipsos which has shown that 2/3 of people in the UK are concerned about rising interest rates. The trouble really for the bank is that the risks of doing nothing and letting inflation soar are just as bad, if not worse, as the risks of doing something, raising interest rates, and risking a recession in the middle of a cost of living crisis.
Indeed, Matthew. Thanks very much indeed. Let's take a look at some of the day's other headlines now. And a man has been charged with the murder of 32-year-old Claire Holland, who went missing in Bristol a decade ago. Ms Holland was last seen leaving a pub in the city centre on the evening of June 2012 and has not been seen or heard from since. 40-year-old Darren Osmond will appear before Bristol Magistrates Court later today. The mother of a missing student nurse has made an emotional appeal for information as police release these new CCTV images. 24-year-old Awami Davis has been missing since leaving her home in Grays in Essex on the 4th of July. Nicole Davis says she believes that someone has information on her daughter's whereabouts. Campaigners say that more needs to be done to support young people and prevent suicides after the government announced further funding for student mental health services. The Student Minds Mental Health charity has received a 3-year funding commitment to extend the provision of student space. England's Lionesses have written an open letter to Tory leadership candidates Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, demanding that all schoolgirls have access to a minimum of 2 hours a week in sports classes. The Euro 2022 winners warned that women's football has come a long way, but it still has a long way to go. Now, China is conducting military drills off the coast of Taiwan after saying that it would begin a series of live fire exercises today. It comes after US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to the island angered Beijing. Well, this morning, Taiwan says that several governmental agencies have been hit by cyber attacks. Well, let's get more on this now. Divyan Gopalan is the international editor at Taiwan Plus and joins me now. So tell us a little bit more about what's happened in the wake of Nancy Pelosi's visit then.
That's right. China warned that the People's Liberation Army would not stand idly by and they would take action. And this is what they're doing. About 20 minutes after Nancy Pelosi first landed on Taiwan soil, China announced these military exercises. Now, it's not unusual for China to have such activities when there are dignitaries in Taiwan, especially high-level foreign dignitaries. But this time, the kind of exercises they are planning and they have planned and have started, they say, is unprecedented. In fact, Chinese state media says they've already launched a long-range missile into the eastern waters of the Taiwan Strait. They say that's that's the start of their firing exercise. And this precedes some activity overnight where drones passed over Kinmen Island, that's part of Taiwan's territory, which is about 10 kilometers away from mainland China. And Taiwan's military had to fire flares to try to deter them. Now, Kinmen Island is believed to be, or said to be, the first point of attack should China choose to invade Taiwan. So it's a very sensitive area there. So yes, China has already started these large-scale military exercises around the waters here that the Ministry of Defense have said it amounts to a blockade of Taiwan. They've asked for shipping routes to be changed, aviation routes to be also moved around, because it poses a great danger to anyone who could be in the path of those long-range or even possible short-range naval missiles that would be hitting Taiwan's territorial waters.
Divya Gopalan, thanks very much indeed for that update. Now, Liz Truss has received a fresh boost in her bid to become the next Conservative leader as she and rival Rishi Sunak prepare to face the cameras on Sky News this evening. A fresh poll suggests the gap between the Foreign Secretary and former Chancellor is widening in favour of Ms Truss. And here to pick apart the numbers is our polling pit stop. In our polling pit stop is Chief Executive of Kantar Public UK. Very good morning to you.
Morning.
Let's take a look through your poll. New polling shows a lot of the country still haven't made up their minds on the best leadership candidate in their view.
That's right. We've got, our latest poll shows that nearly 50% of the British public are still undecided. And then with Rishi and Liz, it's kind of split equally. If you look beneath those figures at Tory voters, actually Liz is in front with 45%, while Rishi Sunak has 31%. The Tory party members are the ones who vote, are a much smaller kind of constituency. So you get kind of further refinements of that. But at the moment for Tory voters, Liz Truss is in the lead, but for the general public, most people are still undecided.
Yeah, they do look very evenly split there, don't they? But one thing that the public seem to be relatively agreeing on is the need for a general election. That seems to be one of their views that's coming forward in your poll.
Yeah, that's something we've seen growing over the last couple of months is, over 50% of the population saying that we should have a general election. And we might see that as wanting to give a fresh mandate to a new government, whomever that is. When you go beneath the figures, overwhelmingly Labour voters, 78%, want a general election. That's perhaps not unsurprising. 50% of Tory voters don't want, a kind of a general election. But there's still a sizable portion of the population who want to see the general public given that opportunity to make that decision.
And what about what people want from their new leader? What are we learning about that?
It's very clear, and it was interesting, you had the segment previously around the NHS. Increasing capacity in the NHS is always in the top two of our polling. I mean, it's an ever-increasing concern with reports of waiting lists and the pressures. Growing the economy, again, unsurprising. 6 out of 10 people are telling us that they are more worried about the economy than they were back in January, and 6 out of 10 people are finding it harder to meet their bills. Reducing taxes is there, but interestingly, for Tory voters, reducing taxes is not their third priority. It's controlling immigration. Reducing taxes is less of a priority for Tory voters than we might think.
And Liz Truss pulling ahead in terms of the Tory voters, as we were saying, but what about her policies? How are they going down?
So it's there's a lot of discussions around reducing the size and the cost of the civil service, renegotiating with the Northern Ireland agreement with the EU, you know, kind of like quite hard-nosed policies. When we ask the public, again, it's grow the economy, reduce the cost of living, increase capacity in the NHS. And the action that we're seeing people want is very direct. Take VAT off fuel, reduce fuel duty. It's those direct interventions that people are telling us that they want to see.
Very interesting. It'd be interesting to see if some of that comes up in the questions in tonight's debate. Craig Watkins, appreciate your time. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Welcome back. The two remaining candidates in the race for number 10 will tonight face Conservative Party members in a live leadership programme here on Sky News. Now, last night, they also faced members at a hustings in Cardiff, so let's take a listen.
We will be able to take on the plastic patriot, Sir Keir Starmer. And we will be able to take on the low-energy version of Jeremy Corbyn that is Mark Drakeford. And we will win. We will win, my friends.
I passionately believe, and all the evidence supports it, that I am the candidate that offers our party the best opportunity to win everywhere and ensure that Keir Starmer does not walk through the doors of number 10 Downing Street at the end of that election.
So how optimistic are the Foreign Secretary's supporters feeling? Well, let's get the view now of one of them, the Attorney-General Suella Braverman, who joins me now. Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Let me just start by asking you about an article you've written in today's Daily Mail. You've got pretty angry in that article about what you describe as the woke orthodoxy of diversity, equality and inclusion. And you're particularly aiming your fire at diversity officers and training. But doesn't diversity benefit institutions like the civil service?
I'm all for a diverse workforce, I'm all for meritocracy, I'm all for inclusion. Those are good things in our society, and Britain is a real champion of those values. What I've been very dismayed by, however, is the takeover by HR teams, by campaign groups, which have propagated a political ideology when it comes to identity politics. And that's what my article is about. We've seen thousands of hours, at huge cost to the taxpayer, spent on diversity and inclusion training. And it's been divisive, not inclusive. It's been patronising, not empowering. It's based on an assumption that me, as an ethnic Asian woman from working class roots, must be a victim, necessarily oppressed. That's a misassumption, and I think it creates division. It creates, it's tearing the society, tearing up our society, breaking down the fabric of our country, and I think it's a waste of money.
But their supporters would say they're exactly what's needed to promote the diversity you say is so badly needed.
No, I disagree. I think the way it's taught and the way it's trained is indoctrinating. I think that it's the training materials that I've seen used in the civil service is riddled with left-wing views on race and gender, things like white privilege. Civil servants are taught about microaggressions. They're taught about white fragility. They're taught about how to be a straight ally. I don't think those are objectively impartial when it comes to politics, and I don't think they're good value for money, and I don't think ultimately that's what taxpayers want their civil servants or their government lawyers to be spending their time on.
Your Attorney General, how important do you think that equality laws and anti-discrimination practices are?
Oh, wholly important, absolutely. This country has made massive strides in the field of equality and human rights, and that was a really proud record on supporting people who have been, had grievances in society and in the workplace. We've got a very good track record. Britain is one of the best places in the world to be a woman, to be an ethnic minority, to be a gay person. We have a great record on rights and equalities. Let's champion that. Let's not keep creating division.
But does this not send out the wrong message then, if we want to champion that? And are you concerned that there are reports that members of the LGBT plus Conservative group are questioning their future in the party because of this anti-woke message?
Not at all. I think, actually, the Conservative Party has an enviable track record. We're the party that introduced and legislated for same-sex marriage, something that I would have voted for, something I'm very, very proud of in this country, and that it was a Conservative Prime Minister and that led the way on that. I think that we're very inclusive in our party, and actually our recent leadership campaign demonstrates the modern, diverse, meritocratic Conservative Party that we are. We're a party in which, whatever your personal characteristic, it's about your talent and your ability to do the job that really counts.
I mean, is a move like this going to be even popular? You've said that it's going to be money saving. You talked about it being £12 million of saving, but the latest poll that we've been talking about this morning says just 6% of Britons think that reducing the size of the civil service should be a priority. This isn't even a vote winner, is it?
Well, it's not really about being a vote winner. This is about making government work well for the British people.
But you're trying to appeal to the public, aren't you?
Well, we've got to do our job. We've got to deliver on our manifesto commitments, and we've got to do that in the best possible way, at the best value for money. And the civil service is too large. We are bloated, and that's why this Prime Minister and both leadership candidates have been supportive of reducing the size of the state. Liz Truss, incidentally, has been very, very strong on trying to cut out waste in Whitehall, cut out the quangos, reduce the regulations, reduce the diversity and inclusion training, which doesn't really serve a material purpose.
But the point I'm making is the polls suggest that people generally don't think it should be a huge priority. They might say the cost of living is a huge priority for them by contrast. And at a time when we're going through that, and also there are tensions overseas as well, you've chosen to write an article in the Mail which is anti-woke. Is that really your biggest priority at the moment?
I wouldn't necessarily describe it as anti-woke, actually. I'd say it's against identity politics.
Officers.
It's against identity politics and the divisive nature of this trend that we're seeing in our corporate and public sector. But ultimately,
do you think this is
as
the
I
biggest
said,
issue of the day? That's why you've chosen to write
No, I
on
don't think
it.
it's the biggest issue of the day. I think the biggest issue of the day is how we support families and businesses with the cost of living. And that's why that's been the priority of this campaign for the leader of the party, and it's by far the most important issue. It's how we take a muscular stance against Vladimir Putin. It's about how we deliver public services. But what's important about this civil service issue is that when it comes to issuing passports on time, when it comes to getting people's driving licences to them in a prompt nature, it comes to civil service efficiency, it comes to government delivery. And if we can reduce the cost of civil service, reduce the cost of government, that's not only good for the economy and public spending, it's also really good for efficiency and public service delivery for individuals.
OK, you say that the economy is one of your priorities and Liz Truss's priorities. Well, the Bank of England is expected to put up interest rates today, possibly as much as by 0.5%. That would be the biggest rise for 27 years. Liz Truss has made a lot of spending commitments. She wants to cut taxes to the tune of around £30 billion. She says she'll pay for that through economic growth. Are you worried that higher interest rates will dampen that growth and she won't be able to pay for these promises?
No, interest rates should have been raised a long time ago, and the Bank of England has been too slow in this regard. Interest rates are a really important gravitational pull on the value of assets, and it's really important to curb inflation. So actually, it's very welcome that the Bank of England is increasing interest rates now. But what we really need to do, and this is why Liz has got the right plan for dealing with cost of living challenges, is that we've got to ensure that we review the Bank of England's mandate. She's very interested in looking at how the Bank of England operates, maintaining its independence, of course, but also ensuring that it's much better placed and more responsive in the future to economic challenges like the type we're seeing at the moment. The challenge that we're facing at the moment is the fight against global inflation. Raising interest rates is a lever that the Bank of England has in that fight. Reducing public spending is another, and cutting taxes so that families and businesses can grow their way out of the challenges is a very important step forward. And that's why Liz is the standout candidate for me, because she's forthright on the absolute need to cut taxes.
But cutting taxes is inflationary.
Cutting taxes is going to be very important for families. So when we look at the cost of living...
I'm sure that many families will be welcoming the idea of tax cuts, but it'll allow them to spend more money. It's inflationary.
Well, not necessarily, because actually what we're going to see, if we do lower the tax burden... No, don't forget, we've got the highest tax burden in 70 years. People say we can't afford to cut taxes. Liz thinks, and I agree with her, that we can't afford not to cut taxes. If we cut taxes, we're going to free up businesses to invest more more in their research and development, employ more people, lower their costs. And that's only going to be good for the economy. They're going to generate more revenue to the exchequer. That's going to generate more economic growth. And therefore, we have more to invest in our public services. Cutting taxes is the necessary step to take. And that's why Liz is the right person to lead us through these economic challenges.
Another quick bit of detail on the Bank of England. How are you going to reform the Bank of England? You want to give them more powers? You want to give them fewer powers? I'm confused.
Well, Liz Truss has made clear that she wants to review the mandate that the Bank of England
So what does that
has.
mean?
So that's going to be looking in detail at exactly what the Bank of England does and see whether it's actually fit for purpose in terms of its entire exclusionary independence over interest rates. The last time this was done was in 1997. It's right and it's ripe now to review whether that is the right settlement when it comes to our monetary policy. Of course, that's not to take away the Bank of England's independence, but there are many other models around the world where central banks have different degrees of independence over monetary policy. For example, Japan is a country at which we're looking. And I know that Liz is very, very keen on radical reform to ensure that monetary policy can be much better placed and more responsive to inflationary pressures, but also economic challenges.
The NHS Confederation, we spoke to their chairman this morning, has sent letters to Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak calling on them to spend more time on their campaign talking about the health service. Why has this been so absent from Liz Truss's campaign? Why has this not been a big priority?
Well, I don't think it has been absent. I think having watched some of the debates and hustings between Liz and Rishi, I think it's almost always come up as a question
Come up as a question,
members.
but not necessarily policies forthcoming on that subject. And Liz Truss is abandoning the national insurance rise. The money was supposed to go towards the health service.
Well, again, I mean, this is about a combination of stewardship of our economy in a responsible way, so cutting taxes, as we talked about earlier, but also delivery of public services. And Liz is absolutely clear that we are going to stand by our 2019 manifesto commitments. So the new hospitals, ensuring that people get access to a GP face-to-face, ensuring that there is better patient flow through our A&E by enabling better primary care, and reforming social care. We all know, well, many of us know, that it's painful, it's heartbreaking, and it's incredibly difficult these days. If you've got an elderly relative and you're trying to navigate the care, the labyrinthine process of getting a continuing healthcare package, it shouldn't be that way. And that's why Liz will be introducing major reforms to ensure that there's more equity when it comes to affording social care for elderly relatives, but also enabling better delivery of primary care. So that is an absolute non-negotiable basic tenet of Liz's campaign.
OK, and I do want to get you to get your views on a subject as Attorney General about Archie Battersby, the 12-year-old whose family have been fighting to keep him on life support. His mother, Holly Dance, said last night it feels wrong that the Court of Appeal have taken away our rights. Do parents in this country, in your view, have enough rights when it comes to the care of their children?
Well, first of all, I must just put on record my deepest sympathies for the family of Archie Battersby. I cannot begin to imagine what he and his family have been going through. This is an incredibly heartbreaking situation, and everybody is watching as the parents and the family try relentlessly to look after and do the best by their son. Any parent, I'm sure, would try to do the same. This has gone through the English courts, and a decision was made by our Supreme Court a few days ago not to grant permission to appeal. And following that, as I understand it, the family applied to the European Court of Human Rights to seek an intervention from the Strasbourg Court. That was declined by the European Court of Human Rights. It's not for me to look behind those decisions of independent courts, but of course this is heartbreaking, this is incredibly sad, and my thoughts go to the family.
But as a general rule, aside from this case, do parents have enough rights over the care of their children, do you think?
I think generally we have a very important balance to strike in this country. I think generally, yes, parents do have sufficient rights. The legal presumption is that parents are acting in the best interest of their children until or unless proved otherwise. And I think that generally the best interests of the child are the guiding theme in any of these decisions, and parents will be best placed to understand what the best interest of their child. In highly complex, both legally and morally, issues like these ones, there are very many different competing factors like medical opinion and the value of clinical intervention. That has to be weighed against the parents' wishes as well, and many other factors in these cases. These are not straightforward. They're highly, highly complex matters involving detailed issues of medicine and medical ethics, as well as the child's welfare. And I have confidence that our courts and our judges will have looked at these issues incredibly thoroughly, incredibly sensitively, and have reached the right decision.
And finally, before I let you go, let me just quickly ask you about tonight's debate on Sky News. What can we expect from Liz Truss? What does she have to do?
Listen, I'm incredibly proud and excited to be supporting Liz, to be the leader of our party and the next Prime Minister. She has proven time and time again that she is experienced, that she delivers, and that she's got a bold and bright vision for our United Kingdom. She is performing incredibly well. I was just speaking to party members yesterday evening about Liz's candidature. The response is very, very positive. People are coming to Liz in their droves, not just MPs, but also members.
It's a nice debate. What will we see from her? Very quickly.
I think we're going to see typical Liz. We're going to see bright, bold, exciting Liz who's going to set out a bold vision for our country, supporting families and businesses with the cost of living, cutting taxes, taking a firm stance on Brexit promises and delivering for the country.
OK, Suella Braverman, thanks very much indeed for coming in. We appreciate it. Now then, as we were discussing there, the Bank of England is set to make what's forecast to be the biggest hike in interest rates for 27 years in the face of soaring inflation. Hundreds of thousands of people could see their mortgages and loan repayments jump by hundreds of pounds. So let's get more on this and get the thoughts of the personal finance expert Gemma Godfrey, who joins us now. So, Gemma Godfrey, first of all, explain to us why the Bank of England might make this move.
Well, the Bank of England has a really tough challenge where they're trying to control inflation, but they don't want to tip us into recession. So what we've been hearing for the past few months is that our economy has been slowing down. We're not spending as much. Companies aren't selling as much, and that obviously risks jobs. But obviously, everybody is aware that our everyday living costs are rising. They're rising by 5 times. They're set to rise by more than 5 times as much as the target that the Bank of England sets. And it's a war on all fronts. It's food, it's energy. You know, people are really, really struggling. So the Bank of England will try and increase rates to try and slow this down. But obviously, there's calls that they've been too slow, they're being too aggressive, and it's a very, very tough balancing act for many millions of families around the UK.
Well, yes, so how will people feel the impact if this rate rise does go ahead? Will they see prices falling quite quickly if it happens?
No, the problem is that there's a lag. So the Bank of England will raise interest rates, fine, and this is going to be the 6th interest rate rise in a row. To put it in context, rates were at a historical low before that. So it is actually expected that the Bank of England could continue to raise interest rates. But the effect that we see is more of an immediate hardship on people that are borrowing. So borrowing rates will be going up. So obviously variable mortgages will be hit immediately. And, you know, it'll be harder for first-time buyers, and it'll be harder for people that, you know, are borrowing money on credit cards, for example. But in terms of the positive impact, so the impact in terms of for savers to get a better interest rate on their savings, or for prices to fall, that takes a lot longer. And that's why it's really, really tricky for the Bank of England to make this move, because in the very, very short term, what it does, the immediate effect is it just makes borrowing more expensive at a time when it's more expensive to feed your family, to keep them warm, to transport, to travel to your job.
So any tips for how people should manage this if they're looking at interest rates going up? What should they do with their money?
I mean, it is one of the toughest times. I usually like to come on the show and come and say, here's 3 or 4 different, very easy tips. And I mean, the first thing to say is that many families are really, really struggling. And so the first big tip is to speak up, is that there are, energy suppliers, banks, that really, the earlier you can speak to them and agree a payment plan, the better. Because what you want to do is avoid penalties. And most of all, you want to avoid going more into debt, because debt is going to be getting more and more expensive as interest rates go up. So there is actually something that the regulator has said that energy providers need to do, which is to provide an affordable payment plan. And a lot of energy providers have hardship funds, free support services as well. There's retailers that are offering discounts if you want to donate clothes that you don't use anymore. There's websites to help check to see whether you're buying the cheapest petrol, though don't travel too far to go to those places. Yellow ticket items at supermarkets can also help you buy things a bit cheaper.
We're out of time, but brilliant advice, Gemma. I'm sorry to cut in, but we must say goodbye. Thanks so much for all your tips.